I am going to show you the first painting this morning, but I'm actually going to start without turning comments off for once, just for the first few moments, because I want to see whether anybody can tell me what this is a painting depicting or who this is depicting, because it's something that maybe we've seen before. There we go. So I hope you can see it well enough with the comments over it. There isn't a prize for fastest on the buzzer, apart from my ever enduring admiration for your art history knowledge. So I hope you can see the painting well enough. It's not a cat weasel. Ricky, you're on. Are you sure you're only on tea this morning, Ricky? So it is an image of an old man who is kind of taking a bite out of a child. This is by Rubens. So this dates to 1638. It's now in the Prado in Madrid. A slice of 24/7. You really have got an interesting life, Ricky. No? No? No one? No one? Yes! I think you meant Kronos instead of cronies, but yes, it is Kronos, it is Saturn, it is Rubens' take on Saturn devouring his son. So we saw, I can turn comments off now, well done, thank you very much. Turn off commenting. So we saw this one before. I don't know whether all of you were watching. I know some of you were. So this is Goya's version of Saturn or Kronos devouring his son or one of his children. We always say son, don't know why. And this is the Rubens version. Equally as delightful, isn't it? So the Rubens obviously has taken a slightly more, I was going to say realistic. This isn't realistic at all. It's sort of, it's much more use of fine painting, if you like. The way that he's done Saturn's body, I think, is particularly fantastic. It's a really wonderful depiction of older flesh sagging, and it's not quite accomplished, it's extremely accomplished. This is towards the end of Rubens' life, and that in comparison to this lovely, scrumptious, plumptious little child that he's taking a bite out of. Oh my God, do I sound a little bit vampiric myself? It came up a little bit over the top perhaps. But yes, so this is Rubens' take on Saturn devouring his child. And if you remember the story, Saturn was, or Kronos was, one of the very first, very ancient gods, and he was learnt in a prophecy that one of his children would overthrow him, would become more powerful than him and overthrow him. And so to try and ensure against that, every time his wife Rhea gave birth to a child, he would gobble it up. He would gobble it up whole. Obviously not what's happening here, and indeed not what happened with Goya either. That probably just didn't provide enough artistic what would be the word? It wouldn't be dramatic enough. Artistic drama. So anyway, so he gobbles them all up until Rhea thinks, right, okay, this last one, we're not going to do the gobbling up. She had a baby, and the baby was taken away. She wrapped a stone, and he gobbled the stone instead, and the baby was Zeus. And of course, Zeus lived and eventually grew up to be inevitably more powerful than his father Kronos or Saturn, and did indeed overthrow him and made him vomit up all of the other children that he had swallowed, and the rock, which became Mount Parnassus, and the children became gods and goddesses. So this, like the Goya, is also in the Prado in Madrid. And now we see that the Prado has actually reopened, but to very limited numbers of visitors every day. And so they've done a little bit of a rehang, and they've actually hung this painting, Rubens' version of Saturn devouring his son, or one of his sons, alongside the Goya. So there's a happy room for you to go into. So if you think you've had a bad time during lockdown, then just go and have a look at these two paintings together, because you just have to think, well, you know what, at least my life isn't that bad. At least my father didn't eat me when I was a child. So you may notice, I think I've got a couple of close-ups here. Yeah, this, I don't know whether this perhaps is possibly more disturbing than the Goya in some ways. You can see, if you just look at his eyes, Saturn's eyes, he's looking at this child who is almost looking out at us, although I don't think he's focusing on anything, the poor thing. And I kind of feel as though Saturn is almost trying to suck his life force. It is quite creepy, quite very creepy in that way. And then there's another interesting the part of this painting, which are the stars at the back, the three stars at the back. And of course this is reference to the fact that Saturn is one of the planets, the sixth planet that was named. And it's possible that Rubens knew about Galileo's theory. So Galileo, by this point in time, had a theory that in fact Saturn was flanked by two smaller stars either side. We know today that that isn't exactly true. We know today that if you look through a telescope at Saturn, then it's actually sort of got a ring that sort of orbits around it. But this is what they thought back in the 17th century. So this is Rubens' take on that. So a nice, happy beginning to a slightly grey, rainy Thursday. Well, you always say you like the slightly dramatic and gory ones, and I think this is both dramatic and gory. Now, this one, let's move on. So exactly 300 years earlier, Fra Angelico, who we've also met, painted this little panel. And this is from the altar of the altarpiece, the San Marco altarpiece. This is actually in Germany, but would have originally been in Florence. So you remember the story of these two fellows, Damien and Cosmas, who during the night basically amputated a gangrenous leg from this gentleman Justinius, and transplanted on in fact a black man's leg. So he woke up and had one leg of one colour and one leg of another colour. Well, this is another part of the same altarpiece, and the two chaps on the cross are in fact Damien and Cosmas. So this is, I didn't give you the date exactly, but this is 1338 to 50, no, 1338 to 40. So there we go. So these two fellows up on the cross, yes, Damien and Cosmas. And you'll notice that they look quite relaxed, don't they? They're just kind of hanging there, having a little chat, maybe. They don't look like they're in any kind of trouble whatsoever. And then you'll notice that there's quite a few things flying around in the air. And what happened was that eventually the authorities caught up with them, because of course, as well as being surgeons, they were also preaching the Christian faith in a pagan town. And so what happened to people that preach the Christian faith in pagan towns, which pretty much all towns were pagan, they got martyred mostly. So Damien and Cosmas, I'm smiling. I shouldn't smile when I say these things, are put on crosses to be crucified, but it doesn't affect them. They're not really damaged by it. And so the crowd are pretty cross, and so they start throwing stones at them. But what happens then is the stones come back and they hit people that are throwing them in the face, or they come back and they hit them. So this is a gentleman who is in the crowd. He is over to the right hand side as you look at the whole painting. So he's got a stone that's just hitting him, although I do think it looks a little bit like part of a headphone. It kind of looks like he's, if you can see, there's a stone the other side, or perhaps we can pretend that's hidden, and I kind of think that he's just kind of actually having a good one and having a little bit of a dance while all this is going on, eyes closed, feeling the music. That's my strange mind at work. So this doesn't work because the stones come back and they hit people that are throwing them. So then the crowd get really cross, and they then drag in 3 of Damien and Cosmas's followers, or possibly their brothers. So then we've got the 3 in the centre here. Also, I have to say, looking quite nonchalant, because they are spared any injury whatsoever at all. So even when arrows are fired, nothing happens. Can you see actually the arrows? If I come back, you can see that the arrows mostly are flying in the other direction. There's one just down on the to the right hand side of the painting, just above the horizon, that's actually bent over. So it's on its way. It's kind of doing its circuit and kind of coming back like a boomerang arrow back into the crowd. And then this is what happens. So those people that have been firing the arrows, once again the arrows come back at them. So Damien and Cosmas and their other brethren do not get killed by crucifixion, or through being stoned, or through being shot at by arrows. And of course, this is a story from where else? Has to be the Golden Legend, that 13th century compilation of stories, biblical stories, or stories that didn't make it into the Bible, that was put together by Jacob de Varenne. Damien and Cosmas, like most martyrs, ended up rather unfortunately being killed they had their heads chopped off. Which is, I think, another panel in this altarpiece, a happy altarpiece, as so many of them were. But yes, so this is an altarpiece that we call the failed crucifixion of Damien and Cosmas, because I'm sure that, having seen the leg amputation and transplants, I'm sure you were all wondering exactly what happened to them, and now you know. So to end with, did any of you, haven't got comments on, did any of you actually figure out what was on my stories when I was talking about Elevenses with Lynne and the tree? Well, here's a very similar image. This is what was going on. I'll show you the one that I put on my stories in a minute. This is from a manuscript. It is actually a copy of a book that was called Roman de la Rose, the book of the rose, the book of the flowers, which was basically a chivalric romance that was originally created, published, distributed, I don't think you could call it published, but distributed in the 12th century. And it was then copied in the 14th century by a workshop sorry, it's 13th century, and then copied in the 14th century, by a couple in France who ran an atelier, ran a workshop called Richard and Jeanne de Montbaston. And they basically they copied the manuscript, the Roman de la Rose, and it became very popular again. And this is one of the images from one of the pages. But in fact, Richard de Montbaston died in 1350 something or other. And Jeanne outlived him by quite some number of years. So possibly it was Jeanne's handiwork, this little image. I don't know, perhaps she's missing her husband. But yeah, so here is a nun picking fruit from a phallus tree. I don't know how she's deciding which one she's going to pick, because they all look the same size to me, although they get smaller, strangely, as she puts them into the basket. That's not a euphemism. Yeah. So, an unusual manuscript, shall we say, but this wasn't just a figment of Jeanne's imagination, and, you know, wasn't a one-off, not by any stretch of the imagination, because this kind of image was quite popular in the 14th century on pilgrim badges and woodcuts, and then actually in the year 2000, this is what I showed on my stories on Instagram, in the year 2000, archaeologists were looking, they were excavating, and they found this mural on the inside of a fountain. And I love it because, first of all, you think, oh, that's really nice. You know, there's a lovely tree and there's some people hanging out under the tree and there's some lovely birds. And then you get close up and you have a better look at the tree, and there you go. Thank you. I've actually got one. I don't know what you can see on your screen, but I've got one pointing at my head on my screen. Nice. So why? Why? Well, several reasons, none of which fully explain. They're just kind of, I say reasons, kind of more hypotheses, really. Possibly it's a symbol of fertility. Possibly it's the opposite and something to do with impotence. Possibly in terms of the Roman de la Rose by Jeanne de Montbaston. This is the manuscript page, so you can see to the bottom left you've got the phallus tree, and then over on the other side of the page you've got a monk and a nun embracing. So possibly it's slightly satirical. It could also be because Roman de la Rose was a text that was very much about chivalry and the chivalric knight and poetry and intellect and that kind of thing. So kind of, again, perhaps a little bit a bit of a satirical take, or just maybe just people back in medieval times liked laughing at willies. I don't know. It's an extraordinary image. There we go. And on that, I will finish and put comments back on. There we go. So, I don't know really what you say to that, to be honest. Yeah. The phallus tree, shall we call it, a bit too rude for you, Jamie. Oh, I'm sorry if I've, yes, a little bit rude. But no, it's strange, isn't it? It's funny. Another jaw dropper, more. Thank you. On that, actually, more. I am going to keep doing the Thursday Elevenses. I'm for the foreseeable future. I'm not going to stop doing them. But Monday ones, I think I will stop. So I'm going to do a Monday Elevenses next Monday. And that's going to be the last one for a while, but don't worry, because there will be plenty of other things. I'm just finding that I'm getting quite busy now. I'm doing some Zoom tours and a few other things. So yes, so Mondays will be, next week will be the last one, because also I think people are going back to work and people have got kind of more that they're doing anyway. But Thursdays will definitely carry on, and we will definitely carry on with all sorts of weird and wonderful offerings. I bet they didn't sell them in the garden centre. No, Dan, I don't think they did sell them in the garden centre. Till you go back to work mid-July. Okay. Well, you know what? It's lovely. It's lovely to have everybody live, but it's also, of course, I put them onto Instagram sooner rather than later, depending on what Instagram is doing at that day. I always try and do it as quickly as I possibly can. So they're always up there. So they are always things that you can go back and have a look at. But there is something quite nice about doing live things. But yes, so I am zooming in on Zeus again this evening. I think Steph is joining. I don't know whether a couple of others of you on here are joining tonight. So that will be fun. I've got another Zoom tour in the making, which will also be fun. And I will see you on Monday, and then I'll see you on Thursday. We've got a Pepped Up by Paintings, or curated canapes and cocktails coming out on Saturday as well. So have a great weekend, everybody. I'll look forward to seeing those of you that are joining this evening at 6:15. I will send out the link later on. But have a good day. Bye.